Directors usually don't remake their own work, but in the case of The Man Who Knew Too Much, Alfred Hitchcock manages to capture two significant parts of his career with one film. The original 1934 picture came at the start of Hitchcock's peak in the United Kingdom, while the 1956 remake continued his height in the United States. While discussing both versions with Francois Truffaut, Hitchcock described the original work as that of a talented amateur, while the remake was that of a professional. So what did Hitchcock change from his height in the United Kingdom to his height in the United States that formed him from a talented amateur into a professional? To begin, let's dive into what Hitchcock used to form his films.
I usually prefer to make the picture on paper, all the picture, that is to say, to design the production and to work with the writer so that the direction of the picture is in the script.
This focus on the script can be seen from the very start of Hitchcock's career in the silent era. But the prominence of the screenwriter's role in creating the Hitchcockian film began with Charles Bennett. Bennett wrote 5 of the 7 films that would be considered part of Hitchcock's height in the United Kingdom, beginning with the original The Man Who Knew Too Much in 1934, and finishing with Young and Innocent in 1937. Bennett also wrote the source material for Hitchcock's first sound film, Blackmail, which premiered in 1929. Many people may see this dependence on a screenwriter in the latter half of the 1930s as part of why Hitchcock labels himself as a talented amateur, but according to screenwriter John Michael Hayes, who wrote 4 films during Hitchcock's height in America,
he didn't like to give people credit for anything. He took most of it himself. He felt that he inspired, when he made a picture, it was his guidance, it was his viewpoint, it was his generative force that brought all these people together, and therefore he was the person who did it.
Therefore, the role of the screenwriter, while in Hitchcock's eyes might have lessened, still influenced his narratives in the 1950s as much as it did in the 1930s, proving that Hitchcock maintained this crucial element that made him so successful in the first place. Another element that came with being successful in the 1930s and 50s was the narratives you could create from the political climate. Both time periods were filled with the looming shadow of authoritarian regimes threatening to destroy democracy. Hitchcock's films in the 30s that centered around the looming crisis tended to place the audience straight into a political setting, specifically through stories following the spies who are caught up in the terrors of the time period. His 50s movies instead communicate the ideas of American national security during the Cold War without throwing the viewer into the setting of war. An example of Hitchcock communicating these ideas without throwing the viewer into the political scene is in his 1951 adaptation of the Patricia Highsmith novel Strangers on a Train. While not set in the world of espionage, it is still able to invoke Cold War political discourse by stigmatizing a seemingly homosexual villain, therefore reinforcing the period's categories of sexuality through the name of national identity. The ability to forward the themes of American national security while placing the settings of his films out of the political scene shows the evolution in the subtext of Hitchcock's films. Hitchcock is not only able to evolve the use of subtext from the 1930s to the 1950s, but he also masters suspense by refining his narrative and style.
The essential fact is, to get real suspense, you must let the audience have information. Now let's take the old-fashioned bomb theory. You and I are sitting talking, we'll say, about baseball. We're talking for 5 minutes. Suddenly a bomb goes off, and the audience have a 10-second terrible shock. Now, let's take the same situation. Tell the audience at the beginning that under the table, and show it to them, there's a bomb, and it's going to go off in 5 minutes. Now we talk baseball. What are the audience doing? They're saying, don't talk about baseball. There's a bomb under there. Get rid of it. But they're helpless. They can't jump out of their seats up onto the screen and grab hold of the bomb and throw it out.
In both Sabotage from 1936 and Dial M for Murder from 1954, the audience is filled with suspense through the type of narrative Hitchcock just described. In Sabotage, the audience knows the bomb, which is under the film reels, will go off at any moment. And in Dial M for Murder, the audience knows that Grace Kelly's character is about to be murdered.
But one important factor, if you work the audience up to this degree, that bomb must never go off and kill anyone. Otherwise, they will be extremely angry with you.
This new fact is where the two films differ. Hitchcock's earlier work allows the bomb to go off, therefore angering the audience, while his later attempt provides the heroine with the ability to land a lethal blow on her attacker. This refinement of the narrative allows the audience to feel pleased with the action, and instead of ending the scene with the instant gratification of shock, allows the suspense to linger on. In the climactic scene of both versions of The Man Who Knew Too Much, we can see how Hitchcock's change in style truly pushed him from a talented amateur to a professional. While the fast-paced editing of the original allows us to infer the impending murder, it is the longer takes and closer shots which make up the remake that permits us to grasp the emotions of each character. It is through this difference in cinematography and the choice to remain in the scene when the cymbals crash for the remake that makes a more suspenseful, emotional, and consequential climax to the film. While there are similarities between the way Hitchcock creates and brings to life his stories that are crucial to his height in the United Kingdom and his height in the United States, it is the reality that Hitchcock was able to change his narrative and style to more perfectly fit his ideals of suspense, while allowing the subtext of the time to seep into his films through aspects excluding the setting, that show his true evolution from a talented amateur into a professional.